I gave birth, but the baby I took home was not mine. Story by Bonietta. Have you ever looked into your baby's eyes and felt something wasn't right, like your heart knew a truth your mind refused to accept? That was me. I carried my child for 9 months. I felt every kick, every heartbeat, every sleepless night. But the moment they placed the baby in my arms, I knew deep inside this wasn't my child. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. New mothers worry too much, right? But the doubts grew stronger with every passing day. The way the baby cried, the shape of the tiny hands, even the smell, nothing felt familiar. And when I finally decided to seek the truth, what I discovered shattered everything I believed about trust, hospitals, and the woman who helped bring my baby into the world. Because the truth is, I did give birth. But the baby I took home was never mine. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. The contractions came suddenly, sharp and heavy, and my husband rushed me to Madame Ephima's clinic. The nurses moved quickly, guiding me inside while whispering, "Don't worry, you're in the best hands." Lying on that delivery bed, I kept telling myself I was safe. Madame Ephima stood beside me, smiling softly, her hand resting on mine. "You'll be fine, my dear," she whispered. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, like she had seen this moment 1,000 times before. The pain grew worse, but her presence felt strangely comforting. Hours later, the baby's cry filled the room. Relief washed over me. Tears rolled down my face as they placed the baby in my arms. I kissed the tiny forehead, whispering, "My child." But even in that moment of joy, something felt off. I brushed it aside, blaming it on exhaustion. The baby was mine. He had to be mine. I convinced myself everything was fine, because after all, who would ever question Madame Ephima? Days passed, and the doubts grew louder in my heart. My husband noticed too. "He doesn't look like me," he muttered one evening, his eyes scanning the baby's face. I tried to laugh it off, but deep down, fear gripped me. That was the first crack in the wall of trust one had built around Madame Ephima. And soon, that crack would break open into something none of us could ever imagine. Most people thought Madame Ephima was born a healer, a kind woman with a gift from God. But I learned quickly that the truth was far more complicated. Before she became the famous midwife in Port Harcourt, she was a quiet girl from a small town in Imo State. She grew up in a family that valued appearances more than honesty. Her mother ran a small herbal business and whispered secrets about life and death to Ephima from a young age. By the time she was a teenager, she knew more about the human body than her classmates did, and she learned quickly how power could be hidden behind a smile. People liked her because she seemed caring, but she watched, studied, and waited. She learned that fear and hope were the most powerful tools you could use on others. When she moved to Port Harcourt, she started small, helping women deliver babies in her tiny rented room. She was quiet, polite, always professional. But behind that calm exterior, she began experimenting. Sometimes, she would quietly switch babies for mothers who requested a male child. Other times, she would quietly replace babies who had died with ones she kept alive. Nobody suspected. Everyone believed in her miracles. Her reputation grew fast. People from Lagos, Enugu, even Abuja would come to her clinic. They whispered about her abilities. "She can make impossible births happen," they said. "She gave me my son when I had lost hope." But nobody knew the truth. Madame Ephima was not just helping, she was choosing who would be happy and who would be heartbroken. And her power was in the secrecy. People loved her, but they feared her too. By the time I arrived at her clinic, she had already perfected her system. She knew exactly who wanted what, who could pay for favors, and who would never question her. And I, like so many others, thought I was walking into a place of hope, not a place where life and trust could be stolen. Little did I know that my story and my baby would become the center of her darkest secret. The first thing you notice about Madame Ephima's clinic is how ordinary it looks from the outside. A clean building on a busy street in Port Harcourt, a small sign that says Ephima's maternity care, nothing flashy. But once you step inside, the atmosphere changes. There's a quiet order, a strange calm that feels almost unnatural. The nurses move silently, the mothers sit nervously in the waiting area, and Madame Ephima greets everyone with a warm smile. No one ever guesses what goes on behind those doors. People come from far away, some walking long distances just to see her. Some request a male child. Others beg for a second chance after losing a baby. And Madame Ephima listens carefully, nods, and promises miracles. But her miracles are not always what they seem. Sometimes, when a baby dies quietly during birth, She will quietly take a healthy baby from another mother and hand it over. Sometimes, she switches babies between families without anyone knowing. It is subtle, almost invisible. A small change in the blanket, a whispered instruction to the nurses, a careful smile to the mother holding the wrong child. The staff follow her silently. They know better than to ask questions. They know that her way works, that no one questions her methods because everyone leaves happy, or at least, they think they do. I watched it all, unaware at first. Mothers came in excited, hopeful. Fathers sometimes waited outside, impatient but trusting. They believed in her miracles. And some, like me, walked out thinking they had received a gift from God. Little did I know, I was about to become part of one of her most carefully hidden secrets. The truth about her clinic is simple. People come for hope, but she decides who gets it and who doesn't. And when that day came for me, I realized hope can be a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. I was nervous the day I arrived at Madame Ephima's clinic. My husband had gone ahead to handle some paperwork while I waited in the small, brightly lit waiting area. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something sweet, like flowers, which made the room feel almost unreal. I held my belly, feeling the tiny movements inside me, imagining holding my baby soon. Madame Ephima appeared suddenly, as if she had been watching all along. She smiled at me warmly and said, "You're going to have a strong, healthy child. Don't worry." Her voice was soft but firm, the kind of voice that makes you obey without question. As I followed her into the delivery room, I noticed how organized everything was. The nurses moved silently, handing instruments to her before she even asked. Everything seemed perfect. I didn't yet know that behind that perfection was a carefully hidden system, one that could change lives forever. I watched other mothers deliver before me, silently praying my turn would be smooth. Some cried, others smiled with relief. I could see the joy in their eyes as they held their babies. But I also noticed small, strange things. Sometimes, a mother would leave with a baby and look puzzled, whispering to a nurse. Other times, a baby would cry strangely, as if unfamiliar with the arms holding it. Madame Ephima never noticed, or pretended not to. Her smile never faltered. She spoke quietly to some mothers, nodded at others, and sometimes, when a baby was stillborn, she would take it away for a moment, returning another baby in its place. No one questioned it. People trusted her. And that's how she stayed hidden, behind trust, hope, and her perfect calm. When my labor began, I was terrified. The pain was overwhelming, but Madame Ephima's presence calmed me. She guided me, whispered prayers, and encouraged me to push. I felt safe in her hands. Everyone in the room was quiet, focused, obedient. After what felt like hours, she placed a bundle in my arms. "Here is your baby," she said softly. I looked down and smiled, tears filling my eyes. But something felt off. The baby's cry was quiet, too quiet. Its skin looked different than I imagined. I shook it gently, trying to push the fear away. I thought I was being paranoid. After all, she was Madame Ephima, the miracle worker. People trusted her. Everyone left her clinic happy. I had to trust her too, right? The first night at home, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the baby, feeling that heaviness in my arms. Something was wrong. I whispered my worries to my husband, but he laughed it off. "You've been through labor. You're tired. The baby is fine," he said. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Every movement the baby made, every breath it took, felt foreign. I remembered the strange little things I noticed at the clinic, the whispering nurses, the quiet exchanges, the small smiles Madame Ephima gave mothers. That night, I swore I would watch carefully. I would not let anyone, no matter how respected, take control of my child's life. I didn't yet know that my suspicion would lead to a shocking discovery, one that would expose Madame Ephima's hidden world of baby exchanges and secrets. I didn't yet know how to prove it, but I promised myself I would. I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful. I decided to go back to the clinic. I told myself it was for a routine checkup, but really, I wanted to watch, observe, learn. Madame Ephima greeted me with her usual smile. "How is my little miracle?" she asked. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. I could see the flash of recognition in her eyes. She knew something had changed. I followed her quietly, watching how she moved from one mother to another, her hands gentle but precise. Every action seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic. She wasn't just delivering babies, she was orchestrating lives. That day, I saw it. A nurse picked up a baby that wasn't crying, wrapped it carefully, and handed it to a mother who had come just to deliver a male child. The mother smiled with relief. But the baby's eyes, they were not hers. My heart stopped. I realized then that what I had suspected was true. Babies were being exchanged. Sometimes alive, sometimes after death. And Madame Ephima controlled it all. Fear settled over me like a heavy blanket. Could I confront her? Could I tell anyone? Who would believe me? People worshipped this woman. She was a legend in Port Harcourt and beyond. Mothers came from far states, believing she was a miracle worker. And here I was, holding a truth that could destroy lives, or mine. I knew I had to act carefully. I started documenting everything, small notes, observations, times, names of mothers and babies. Each note was a step toward the truth, a lifeline in case something went wrong. I also began noticing patterns in who came for male children, who came after stillbirths, who left quietly with swapped babies. Madame Ephima's network was vast. She had built it over years, her secret hidden behind smiles, prayers, and whispered blessings. By now, I had spent weeks observing the clinic. Mothers in the waiting area began sharing whispers I hadn't noticed before. "My baby. I don't know whose it is," one said softly. "They told me he was healthy, but I had lost mine last week," another replied. I listened, heart pounding. There were dozens of these stories, all hidden behind smiles and prayers. The more I heard, the more I understood. This was not rare. This was her system. One day, I managed to watch closely. A baby who had stopped crying was carefully wrapped and handed to a new mother who had just requested a male child. The nurse smiled politely. Madame Ephima nodded silently. No one outside that room would ever know. My stomach churned. This was worse than I imagined. She wasn't just helping, she was deciding who would be happy and who would suffer, and I was witnessing it firsthand. Meanwhile, my husband had begun to notice my anxiety. I couldn't hide it. One evening, he said, "Ada, are you sure the baby is fine? You seem worried all the time." I hesitated. Could I tell him the truth? Could I say that Madame Ephima's clinic might not be what it seemed? I finally admitted my fears. My husband, skeptical but concerned, suggested a DNA test. I protested at first. Could we really question a miracle worker? But deep down, I knew he was right. Something was wrong, and waiting would only make it worse. The idea of a test terrified me. If we found out the truth, it could destroy not only my family but countless others who trusted her. I started gathering notes, dates, names, small observations. Every little detail counted. I had to prepare before confronting anyone. The more I watched, the more I realized how meticulously she ran her operations. Nothing escaped her notice, and everyone around her played a part either out of fear or respect. Other mothers began confiding in me more openly. "I just know he's not mine," one whispered. "But I can't say anything. She's too powerful." It was terrifying to hear. So many lives had been quietly manipulated, all under the guise of miracles. I decided to speak to Madame Ephima directly. I asked her gently about a few details, testing her. She smiled, calm as ever. "Everything here is for the children, my dear. I only want to help." Her words sounded true, but I knew better. Her calm was a mask for control, her kindness a tool for deception. Returning home, I noticed subtle patterns in my own baby. Small gestures, tiny habits. It wasn't my child. The DNA test became inevitable. I had no choice. I arranged for the test in another city, quietly. My husband and I followed the procedure, trying not to alarm anyone. Fear gripped me every step of the way. If the truth came out, what would we do? Would she retaliate? The results came back slowly, each moment stretching into a nightmare. And then, the truth hit us. The baby I had brought home was not mine. My heart sank. Fear, anger, and betrayal crashed into me all at once. We realized then the magnitude of what Madame Ephima had been doing. Hundreds of babies, lives quietly swapped, parents deceived. And all along, she had maintained the perfect image of a miracle worker. Armed with the DNA results, we returned to the clinic. My husband and I confronted her quietly at first, then more firmly. Her calm smile never wavered. "Sometimes, we must do what is necessary," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a coldness beneath it. Other mothers began coming forward. They had long suspected, but never dared speak. With our courage, more voices joined. Slowly, her secrets began to unravel. The women who had unknowingly received swapped babies began sharing stories, connecting the dots. It became clear, Madame Ephima had built a network of silent obedience, fear, and secrecy. She had been controlling outcomes for years, deciding who would be happy, who would suffer. And people had worshipped her for it. Word spread quickly. Mothers who had been silent for years began whispering, then shouting, about the hidden truths of Madame Ephima's clinic. Families who had traveled from far states realized they had been deceived. Some babies they thought were miracles were not even theirs. Fear and shock rippled through Port Harcourt and beyond. I watched in disbelief as the network she had built for years began to crumble. Her power, once absolute, faltered under the weight of truth. People who once bowed to her authority now confronted her openly. The clinic, once calm and orderly, descended into chaos. Mothers cried, nurses whispered anxiously, and Madame Ephima's smile faded though she tried to maintain it. Every baby handed over now carried suspicion. What was once a sanctuary of hope became a hall of accusations and fear. Her control, meticulously maintained for years, was finally breaking. And I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief for the truth, sorrow for the lives quietly manipulated. As investigations continued, some nurses and staff confessed. They revealed how babies were switched, how dead infants were replaced, and how Madame Ephima had allowed some wealthy families to select children based on gender. Each confession added weight to the horrifying truth. I listened carefully. Every detail confirmed my worst fears and gave clarity to the weeks of doubt and unease I had endured. Mothers and fathers began comparing stories. They realized patterns, connecting their losses and unexpected gains. Those who had traveled across Nigeria to deliver babies at her clinic discovered a cruel system hidden under the guise of miracles. Families united, sharing grief, anger, and frustration. It was both tragic and empowering to see people who had felt powerless now standing together, demanding answers. Madame Ephima faced questions she had never encountered. For the first time, she couldn't control the narrative. Her calm, perfect demeanor cracked under the scrutiny of mothers and families who had discovered her secrets. I saw fear in her eyes, but also a strange pride. She had built an empire of quiet obedience, and yet, in the end, secrecy was her undoing. DNA tests confirmed the extent of the swaps. Many children were not biologically related to the parents who had taken them home. Couples who had once trusted her completely now confronted a heartbreaking reality. Their babies had been switched, or in some cases, replaced after death. This revelation ignited outrage across communities. People demanded accountability. News spread like wildfire. Families, neighbors, and authorities demanded answers. Madame Ephima's clinic became a center of media attention. Interviews were conducted, stories were shared, and the public finally learned what had been quietly occurring for years. The woman once revered as a miracle worker now faced the weight of a scandal that shook an entire city. I reflected on what I had witnessed. Madame Ephima's power had been built on trust, fear, and secrecy. Her ability to manipulate lives while appearing benevolent was terrifying. People placed their faith in her, believing in miracles, unaware that the truth could be far darker. It taught me something profound. Power in the wrong hands, even when disguised as kindness, can destroy lives quietly. With the truth exposed, families slowly began to heal. Some reunited with their biological children, others sought counseling to cope with grief. Communities discussed accountability and ethics, learning that blind trust, even in revered figures, can lead to devastation. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. Awareness became a form of protection. The story of my baby and Madame Ephima is not just about betrayal, it's a warning. Blind trust, unchecked power, and secrecy can harm even those we love most. Always question, observe, and protect what matters to you. Truth always finds a way. No matter how respected or trusted someone appears, secrets will eventually surface. Protect your life, your family, and your children. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Share this story with your family and friends. Let it serve as a warning, because someone you know may need to hear it today.